Last week, the Valheim dev team at IronGate Studios has dropped huge news about the upcoming biome update, and what immediately caught my attention was this update. We are getting new clothing items, folks. You see, until now, the only clothes that your character could wear were pretty much armor. Light armor, heavy armor, armor. And the community has been crying out for more options to customize your character, as well as more casual wear for roaming around the homestead, tending to the crops, or feeding the chicken. And our voices have been heard. And boy am I excited to talk about this because, in case you didn't know, I'm a bit of a history nerd and I love historical clothing. So today we're going to examine how historically accurate the new clothing items are, so keep watching to see how Valheim scores. But before I get into it, a couple of disclaimers. Disclaimer number 1, I am not a dress historian, nor am I an archaeologist. However, I am passionate about historical clothing, as well as being a reenactor myself. If you want to go deeper on the subject, I encourage you to do your own research or check out the many talented YouTubers with backgrounds in historical costuming or archaeology, some of which are linked at the bottom of my channel homepage. Disclaimer number 2, yes, I know the clothing I'm wearing now is not fully authentic, and I'll point out why later in the video. So with that out of the way, let's get started, shall we? The first thing that jumps out to me are the colors. Those beautiful, vibrant colors showing that yes, people in medieval and Viking times did have color, contrary to what Hollywood will have us believe. Vikings loved color, and fabric could be dyed with plants either native to their lands or imported through their many trade routes. Some colors were more difficult to obtain than others, and therefore only certain classes could afford them, but yellows and greens were fairly common. And if you could get your hands on madder roots, you could obtain bright orange, pink, or red. Blue, although it was very popular in the Viking Age, was a harder color to get because you would need to either import indigo from India and beyond, or master dyeing with woad, which is tricky. Trust me, I have tried and I failed. I'm happy to go into more details about colors and dyeing in the Viking Age because it's a topic I have a bit of practice in. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a separate video on that topic. Here, IronGate has designed clothes in a wide range of colors as well as more plain, natural colors like beige, grey and brown, which would be either dyed with bark or simply wool in its natural state. With the lighting, it's hard to tell what these are, but they seem to be dark blue, grey or brown, and hopefully not black. The second thing I'm delighted to see is embellishments and trims added to most garments depicted. It was very common in the Viking Age to decorate necklines or cuffs with tablet woven braids, or for the more wealthy, with embroidered bands. Tablet weaving is a fascinating craft from the early Iron Age. It's a weaving technique where tablets or cards are used to create the shed through which the weft is passed. By twisting and turning the cards, you can create geometrical motifs in the weave. As the materials and tools were relatively cheap to obtain, tablet weaving was very common to produce narrow belts, straps, or garment trims. We can see them on some of the clothes IronGate has modeled. The mega wealthy even imported silk trims from Asia to decorate their clothes, sometimes embroidered with gold or silver thread. That's some serious drip right there. In this case, IronGate seems to have opted for wide bands of what I would interpret as embroidery on some of the items, which would make them considerably more expensive because hand embroidery takes a lot of time, and big motifs on large pieces of fabric like that would take hundreds of hours of work. Now on to the most important bit, the garments themselves. And since I love playing dress up, especially with clothes I made myself, allow me to demonstrate what people in the Viking era would have worn. A typical Viking man would be wearing a linen undertunic that comes down to the knee or just above, with a flare at the bottom, and some form of wool or linen trousers. Many types and cuts of trousers were found by archaeologists throughout Northern Europe, but since I haven't made any yet, you'll have to bear with my linen PJs instead. I'm not kidding, I was actually sleeping in those last night. Over the linen undertunic, they would wear a wool tunic of a similar cut and shape, maybe with extra flare and a little better fitted around the arms and the chest to show off their form. Yes, these clothes are not very well fitted for me, that's because I made them for my man. Necklines would be simply round or have a slit for the head to pass through and could be closed off with a brooch. On to footwear. Vikings living in cold climates would enjoy the warmth of wool socks, knitted with a technique called nalbinding, literally needle binding in Danish. Again, I don't have such socks, but here's some pictures of an almost entire sock preserved and displayed at the Jorvik Viking Centre in York. A common item of clothing, especially for working men, would be leg wraps or winningas. They're long strips of woolen or linen material wrapped around the legs for extra warmth and protection. They'd have protected the bottom of your trousers from mud and tear from brambles, as well as kept stones, mud and snow out of your shoes. Speaking of shoes, they would be made out of leather, stitched and turned inside out. That's why they're commonly referred to as turn shoes, and we have tons of finds like these ones from Jorvik. They were fairly simple in their design, either closed off by leather thonging or by toggles. As you can imagine, they would probably not last very long, but they were fairly inexpensive to make. For colder climates, they'd come up the ankle for more warmth and could be lined inside with sheepskin or fur. To complete the outfit, let's add on a leather belt. Useful to carry small items in pouches, eating knives and tools in the absence of pockets. Most Vikings would also have headwear such as a hat or a hood to protect from the cold or the sun. The wealthy Vikings also had jewelry, but we'll talk about that later. Now on to the female attire. A typical Viking woman would also be wearing a linen underdress or serk. Those would come down to the ankles just above the foot. They'd probably be wearing linen or wool stockings too to protect their legs. Shoes would be pretty much the same as men's. There was no evidence of gendering of shoes in the Viking Age. Over the serk, they would wear their long tunic or dress, usually made out of wool and with gauze to the sides for additional flair. Those could be a simple long-sleeve dress of the same length as the underdress, or an apron dress, also called smocker or hangerrock, and often shorter than the underdress. The apron dress is called this way because it has straps going over the shoulders with loops at the front where brooches would be used to attach the straps to the body of the dress. There are many finds showing pleating at the front, which was probably both for style, but also I think a practical way to fit the dress around the bust, as many apron dresses seem to be quite tubular in the construction. As I mentioned earlier, the apron dress I'm wearing isn't quite authentic. First, it's made out of linen, and it's not certain that it was common as opposed to wool dresses. However, some research shows that both linen and wool fibers were found attached to brooches in boreal finds, so jury's still out on that one. Then the colour, navy blue. It's extremely difficult to obtain strong and lasting colours on linen, as the dye tends to struggle to take and fades pretty easily over time and exposure. And as we covered, blue was already a difficult colour to obtain, so a very dark blue on linen was probably quite unlikely and very, very expensive. Finally, even though I based the pattern and construction on some finds, including the straps and loops, the wool trim I added is completely made up. Basically, I didn't have any tablet woven braid, but I needed something to reinforce the edge of the dress so that it would hang nicely. So I cut up a band of herringbone wool and machine stitched it on the fabric about an hour before I was due to go to this Viking festival I was going to wear this at. Yes, sometimes practicality wins. Now about headwear. We actually don't know all that much about the common practice there. Christian women may have needed to cover their hair, especially married women, but non-Christian women may not have needed to wear any head covering at all. We have depictions of women without them on stone carvings and figurines of the era, but we also found some linen and silk caps in digs too. So the answer is, who knows? I believe hair coverings like caps, scarves or wimples would have been a practical item, especially for working women, to protect their hair and keep the dirt and smoke out and protect their heads from the sun. So if we compare all of this with the images from IronGate, we're pretty close. Long sleeve tunics, apron dresses over underdresses held by brooches. This guy even seems to have leg wraps. The only garments I'm unsure about are these weird shawl-like things. It's too short to be a cloak, but also doesn't look like a hood. And this one is maybe a cloak and is just clipping into the chair. But even so, it looks a smidge too short. Cloaks would be the equivalent of modern winter coats, so the longer the better to keep us warm. Both seem held by cloak pins, so not sure. The detail I do like, however, is that they look like they're lined with a fabric of a different colour. Cloaks could be lined with linen to be more comfortable to the touch, or doubled with another layer of wool for mega warmth. Fun fact, wool is a great natural water repellent and could keep you dry and warm even in wet weather. And speaking of cloaks, time to move on to the cloak pins depicted. Their shape is that of penannular brooches, meaning a ring that is not fully closed, otherwise it would be an annular brooch. There's a pin attached to it, used to hold the fabric in place. Cloak pins were made out of simple forged iron, pewter, bronze, silver, or even gold, and were often engraved or stamped with motifs. Bronze seemed pretty common, and it looks like that's what IronGate went for. There's tons of different types of brooches and cloak pins found in the Viking era, but not enough time to cover them all in this video. But if you're interested in the topic, I recommend checking out the Welsh Viking. He has some great videos on the topic. I mentioned earlier women wearing apron dresses would hold them up using brooches. These are oval brooches or tortoise brooches, and women sometimes would have decorative beads of glass, amber, or jet strung between them. Other types of brooches would be used too, but oval brooches are the most well known. The beads themselves are a whole other topic to geek out on, but they were mostly found in graves of wealthy women and very rarely in male burials. In the Valheim picture, you can see a male character wearing a few beads, and there is indeed evidence of men wearing up to 4 of them, so Valheim is pretty much spot on there. That necklace also has a Thor's hammer pendant, which was very common as an amulet. Like other types of jewelry, it would be made out of simple forged iron, pewter, or precious metals like bronze, silver, gold, or even simple amber like this one, or bone, and typically they would be fairly small and subtle. This character must be very wealthy because he's wearing the most decorated garb and has lots of bling. We can see he's got 2 arm rings. Arm rings were commonly made out of silver with stamped motifs, and were not only used as decorative items but also as currency. They were usually made out of silver ingots of a specific weight and could easily be chopped in smaller pieces to trade for goods. There are tons of those chopped arm rings and pieces of jewelry found in hoards, and they're commonly referred to as hack silver. The characters are seen wearing leather belts, some with strap ends too, which were very common. Buckles and strap ends would often be embellished with engraved motifs. One thing that the Vikings loved was bling, any opportunity to wear shinies or show off craftsmanship. Belts would have been a practical item to hang things from, but there's also evidence of women hanging small items and tools from their strand of beads. Not represented here, tablet woven belts would also be fairly common. Alright, so time to give Valheim a score for authenticity and historical accuracy. I give Valheim bonus points for use of bright but realistic colours and overall use of embellishments on the garments. Overall, the clothing is pretty spot on, just a few minus points for the weird cloak length, as well as men's tunics being a little too short and the necklines a little too low, but that's just me being nitpicky. Bonus points for jewelry that is very well represented. And a mini minus point for lack of hats or hoods. But we do have hoods as armor in the game, and overall headpieces seem to be counted as armor in the game, so who knows, maybe we'll have more hats too. So with that, my overall score is, drumrolls, 9 out of 10. Well done, IronGate. As usual, keeping up the good work and making us Viking enthusiasts happy. So what does this new clothing mean for the future of Valheim? I'm very curious to see if those new items will be craftable or even customizable, or if we'll need to purchase them like some of the items we buy from Hildir. As we discussed, clothing was, and still is, a display of status and wealth. Will that follow through in the gameplay as well? Where the more customized or luxurious the item is, the more expensive it is to buy or craft? And will these new clothes also act as armor and give us minimum armor points like some of the early game tunics? Or even better, will they give us some buffs for everyday chores around the homestead like cooking, farming, or breeding? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you like this video, let me know by pressing the like button. I always appreciate the feedback, especially given this is a very different style than my usual videos. Alright, enough of me blabbing. Thank you for watching and see you next time. It was very common in the Viking Age to decorate? Blue, although it was very popular in the Viking Age, was Oh no, you're ruining my groove. I have to close the door.